Out everybody. In this video, we'll talk about uh, the pay for truck drivers. You know, if you look at the national average of salary pay for the average American is about $65,000 per year, and in trucking, you can do much better than that. It's if you have experience, like say a 10-year driver, even a company driver can make $100,000 per year. That's pretty good. It's very good. That's for a high school graduate. Doesn't really matter if you got a degree or not. But even guys who don't have any uh, education past high school, can earn $100,000 per year. This is the kind of opportunities that people often say they want, but when they're presented the opportunity, they poo-poo the idea of becoming a truck driver. you know, it's just a stigma associated with driving truck. That's all it is. Um, People are looking for opportunity, but they don't recognize opportunity when it's staring them right in the face. And it's tough. It's real tough. I mean, when you think about careers, you know, driving a truck may not be the first thing that comes to mind. It's like you want to go to school, you want to become, a teacher, you want to become a lawyer, an accountant, whatever, doctor, so on and so on and so on. A lot of people don't, picture in their mind their dream job, what they want to do for a living. They don't necessarily think about driving a truck, but it is one of the highest paying jobs in America. So let's talk about that. I'll give you some of my experience getting into trucking. Is when you start in trucking, you don't start at $100,000 per year. You start way down, because you don't have any experience. So no one's really gonna pay you a lot because you don't have any experience. Back in 2014, when I first started driving, I got my CDL paid for free, but I had to start at the very bottom of the pay, and I was only making 23 cents per mile. That was like an industry low. And then I got an increase, 5 cents per mile to 28 cents per mile. And this is very, very low. But I was willing to take low pay in order to get experience, because I was a rookie. I was a rookie driver. I didn't have any experience whatsoever. And if you want to get in this industry, you gotta start at the bottom. You don't come in and get high pay and you don't have any experience. And I knew that. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to suck it up. I don't like it, but this is very low pay to start. Based on 100,000 miles, you're talking $23,000, $28,000 per year to start. But again, the CDL was free, and they were willing to give me experience. I had no experience. So after the first year, I changed companies and I came to Crete, and Crete bumped my pay up to 45 cents per mile. I mean, doubled my pay. That was huge. That was very huge. So now we're getting about 45, $50,000 per year plus benefits. The benefits were great. Benefits could easily cost another $10,000 to $15,000 per year. So now that's starting to look like a $65,000 a year job with 1 year experience. When you look at compensation, you got to count the benefits plus the salary or the pay. So that coming to Crete was a great opportunity, but I had to have that first year experience before I could come to Crete. Crete doesn't hire anybody without experience. You got to have at least 1 year experience, and you got to have your own CDL training prior to coming to Crete. So I went from 23 cents per mile, or making about 25 to $30,000 a year my first year, to making $65,000 my second year. Huge up, big step. And then I liked it so much, I decided to buy my own truck. And I went from there. Now, even guys who own their own truck, they make pretty good money. They go right up in pay. It's not uncommon for an owner-operator who owns their own truck to make over $100,000 per year. That sounds great, plus benefits. So now you're looking at $100,000 to $120,000 per year income, and it empowers you to do so many things. I was able to pay off my student loans. That was like one of the first things I did. Pay off them student loans. I had been carrying them for a long time. Paid off all those credit cards, got out of debt and got my credit score over 800. But you don't start out, making over $100,000 per year when you first enter the industry. You got to be willing to come in at a lower pay. Part of that is because as a rookie, you're probably going to damage a trailer. It's almost inevitable. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't damage a trailer as a rookie, because it's very challenging for a rookie to back the truck up and not hit anything. And a lot of guys, it just takes practice, a lot of practice. And inevitably you hit a light pole, or you hit another truck or a building or something. So companies, they look at that and they're like, you don't have any experience. You're going to end up damaging one of our trailers, so we're going to start you out at very low pay. But as you gain experience, you become more valuable. An experienced driver could go years without damaging the trailer or the tractor. And you're talking hundreds of thousands of miles without any kind of accident, no property damage, no cargo theft, no cargo damage, nothing. So those drivers are worth more. And they're hauling loads for Walmart and, any groceries, or, just freight in general. I've had loads where I've hauled flat screen TVs, and I know that load was probably worth close to $1 million. So when you think about, the driver is responsible for getting that load, hauled across the country, that driver needs to be fairly compensated. And you look at other job opportunities, especially like if you're a high school graduate, for example, your opportunities may be somewhat limited because you don't have a formal education beyond high school. However, if you learn a skilled trade, and I think having a CDL is a skilled trade, then there's enormous opportunity. It's just like if you were in the oil and gas industry and you were working with the oil rigs. Those guys are high school graduates. They make enormous amount of money. But these jobs are tough jobs. These jobs require sacrifice. If you're in trucking, you may be long haul over the road, 21 days out without a day off. A lot of people don't want to do that or can't do that, for a variety of reasons. Maybe because they have children, or they have other things going on at home that they can't be gone weeks on end. But if you want to make the big money, six-figure income, this is what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of dedication. It's going to take a skill, like a skilled trade. And as the years go by, you become more and more skilled at that trade. So if you look at the national average for salary is like $65,000. You could double that if you own your own truck. So it's a great opportunity. You think about, the cost of going to college and getting a degree, and how many people are doing the exact same thing, and then they struggle to find meaningful employment after they get their degree. And a lot of that is supply and demand. You know, we see it all the time in trucking. If there's a large supply of candidates for a job, then your wage or salary is going to be low. Large supply, low demand. You know, so you have a bachelor's degree in business, so do 10 million other people. You're going to be competing against all of them. You know, a lot of careers don't start people out at a very high pay. You know, they only may get 40,000 a year to start. You know, and they may be limited in how much higher they go. You know, and you're thinking, how am I going to achieve a middle class lifestyle on a $50,000 a year job? Well, you probably aren't. You know, you're going to be highly educated and very low earnings, because there's so many people that also are highly educated that are applying for that job. The competition is fierce, very fierce. You know, and your employer knows it. You know, so one step out of line, you're easily replaced. Now, I don't know about you, but I never felt comfortable or very secure, no job security in that kind of environment. You know, once you get your CDL, it's a different story. Companies bend over backwards, get you in that truck. Your pay is very good. Your benefits are excellent. Your job security is excellent. Even during the pandemic, when a lot of people were sent home because they were non-essential workers, truck drivers were as busy as they ever were. Didn't miss a beat. Got even more busy because everybody was shopping online, and all this product, freight, had to be moved across the country. So I would say in the last 10 years, you know, I always had job security. That meant a lot. It meant a lot to me. And then you add on to that good pay, and then, yeah, you know, now you can be successful. You don't have to worry about losing your job or being unemployed or laid off, plant closing, nothing like that. And you're earning six-figure income. There are people that work at corporations who are managers and directors. They don't make over six figures annually. You know, they have to deal with an enormous amount of stress for very low pay. But you get your CDL, you do better. You do almost twice as better than the national average. You know, and people don't look at trucking in the light of, hey, this is a good paying job. This is a job, it's in high demand. You know, this is an opportunity that, you know, a lot of people would jump at if they knew how great of an opportunity it was. But it's not an easy job, you know, but you just got to be willing. You know, that's the big thing. You got to be willing to put in the work. You got to give in the effort. You know, so I would encourage anybody who is thinking about getting their CDL and getting into trucking, I would say go for it. You know, I don't see why you would regret it. It'd probably be the best job you've ever had. It'd probably be the highest paying job you ever had. But again, you're going to start out as a rookie. You're going to start out with somewhat low pay. But after you got that first year under your belt, you know, you can quickly climb in pay. And then if you decide to buy your own truck and become an owner operator, you could easily get over $100,000 per year or more. You know, so I don't know about you, but I don't know too many jobs that can give you that kind of opportunity. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.